If you're with me, clap twice. Y'all so good. I'm so proud. Let me ask you something. Do y'all know what mob mentality is? Have you ever heard of it? Really? Okay. People act differently when they're a part of a big group. For example, you know, people win the ball games and stuff and they're downtown and they just kind of go crazy and they tear up the lights and all that kind of stuff. That's mob mentality. I'll give you an example. Here's one for you. So do y'all know about Black Friday sales? Okay. You know too much about it, and I do too. The first Black Friday sale that I remember, so I'm just going to tell you how long it's been around, was 1997. And that was like the first time. But the story I want to tell you is about what happened at Walmart in 2008. So it's we've had Black Friday for about eight years going on then. And they had put these large screen TVs on sale. And back then, a TV that would probably cost, well, let's say a 70-inch TV was anywhere from $4,000 to $20,000. Okay, but most of them were like $4,000 to $7,000, which is huge. That's a big price. Now you can get them for say $350. Okay, so Walmart put one on sale. It was less than $1,000. It was a huge deal. And you know how we do? We stand up and get in line, and we just stand at the door waiting on it to open. Well, that's the way this was. And it was in Long Island, New York, and the people were waiting to open. When the doors opened, the people just kind of squirted in like a tube of toothpaste. I mean, they were so strong, they tore the frames of the door and bent the door up. Well, the worst thing that happens is somebody died. Somebody, I think it was a worker from Walmart, probably one of their greeters, or it may have been the poor man that opened the door, but he got trampled to death. So what I want to ask you, and what I want you to think about is this question. Who do you think was responsible for that man's death? That's what I'm saying. Everybody was responsible, because you got to think, were the people that were, I say the people that stepped on him, were they responsible? Well, yeah. What about the people that pushed from the back? Yeah. What about, what if you didn't step on him or anything, you were just in the group? Thank you, very good. You didn't do anything to stop it. Did anyone scream or holler or beg the man, beg for the people to stop as people just trampled over it? So my question was, how much responsibility does each person bear? Do they all get to split the guilt? Or is each person as responsible as the next person when it comes to that? And so today we're going to talk about the man at the well. But before we do, we're going to watch a quick little video. I think is a fun video. It's an experiment that they've done to see how many people are sheep. Do you follow what the group does, or do you do your own thing? So let's see what this lady has to say.
We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this, or would you? Just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Now she's alone, the crowd is gone, and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
Have a seat, and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients
I don't know how
arrived.
the lady at the desk made it.
And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think.
Okay, now what would y'all have done? Be as honest as you can. What about you, Alan? You probably would what? Yeah. Stay seated. It would have been easier to stay seated to me than to look stupid standing. But now that poor lady stood up every time, and she did it when no one was in there. Do you see how sometimes a group can change and move and cause you to do things you might not want to? For example, it's been determined that 5% of the people in a group can make the other 95% do what they want them to do. It's kind of like the rudder of a ship. The rudder is small, the ship is big, but it still moves, and it moves the entire ship. Same thing with your tongue. Your tongue is the smallest part of your body, but you can do great damage with it, or you can do wonderful things with it. Also, did you notice anonymity gives she had some sort of a, how would you say, she was comfortable with the group. She wasn't going against the norm. Whatever they did, she did. She was happy to do it. I remember being in the 12th grade, over in Ferg's class over here, and my teacher's name was Miss Greer, and it was a cooperative office education class. And what they let you do is, if you were a senior, you could go to school half a day, and then you could go to work the other half of the day. And they'd find you a job in a business somewhere. And I really enjoyed it. I thought a lot of my teacher, and there was one thing she told us, and I have never forgotten it. I remember what the lady was wearing at the time. I remember everything about that situation. But she told us, she said, if there's one thing I teach you and I want you to learn and to know is this: have a backbone. Stand up and do something for the right, for the good, or don't be mindless, in other words. Don't follow what everybody else does. Do what you know is to be right, and if nothing else, at least question it. You know, what the guy did, he said, well, you know, why are we doing this? And then once she told him she didn't know why, and he still followed her. So be a leader, don't be just a follower and look like this lady did, doing something silly. So today we're going to read The Man in the Well. I'm not sure if you've read it or not, so I'm going to read it, and we'll just go along. You've got one in your, if you look in your packet, you've got a copy of the actual, you can follow along as I read, and then you've got a highlighter if there's some things you want to highlight. So let's get started. I was 9 when I discovered The Man in the Well. In an abandoned farm lot near my home, I was with a group of friends playing hide and go seek, and something we found in the well, and then I heard a voice of the man in the well calling out for help. I think it's important that we decided not to help him. Everyone like myself was probably on the verge of fetching a rope or asking where we could find a ladder. But when we looked around at each other and it was decided, I don't remember, we ourselves remember the reason why we couldn't help him, but we had decided then. Because of this, I never went very close to the lip of the well, or only came up on my hands and knees, so that he couldn't see me. I want y'all to talk about this one. When I say go, I want you to have 3 minutes to discuss as a group. We'll do it at voice level 3, and here's your question. Why was the narrator careful not to go to the lip of the whale? Why did she want to stay hidden around the edges? So that's going to be what you're going to do. How long are we going to do that? How long am I going to give you, Alicia?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. And what voice level, child? That's right. All right, so ready and go. Okay, let's stop just a little bit early. Why do y'all think the narrator was careful not to go up to the lip of the whale?
So,
Right? I think that's a good idea. Alicia, did you have any idea? Why do you think they didn't want to be seen?
because they knew everybody knew something, so they didn't want to have their business there.
Yep. Very good. Let's finish then. Remember that we're still full of fun and games and laughter when we called down to him. He had heard us shouting while we were playing, and he had been hollering for us to come. He was so relieved at that moment. God, get me out. I've been here for days. He must have known we were children because he immediately instructed us to go get a ladder to get help. At first, afraid to disobey the voice from the man in the well, we turned around and actually began to walk toward the nearest house, which was Arthur's. But along the way, we slowed down, and then we stopped, and after waiting, it would seem like a good while, we quietly came back to the well. We stood or lay around the lip, listening for maybe half an hour, and then Arthur, after some hesitation, called out, "What's your name?" This, after all, seemed like the most natural question. The man answered back immediately, "Do you have the ladder?" We all looked at Arthur, and he called back down, "No, we couldn't find one." Now that we had established some sort of dialogue, everyone had questions. He or she wanted to ask the man in the well, but the man wouldn't stop speaking. "Go tell your parents that someone in the well. If they have a rope or a ladder," he trailed off as his voice was raw, and sometimes he would cough. "Just tell your parents."
Excuse me?
We were quiet, but this time no one stood up or moved. Someone, I think, little Jason, called out, "Hello, is it dark?" And then after a moment, "Can you see the sky?" He didn't answer, but instead told us to go again. When we were quiet for a bit, he called to see if we had gone. After a pause, Wendy crawled right to the edge so that her hair lifted slightly up in the updraft. "Is there any water down there?" She looked around at us, and then she called down, "Yes, they're all gone now." "Isn't there any water down there?" I don't think anyone smiled at how easy it was to deceive him. This was too important. "Isn't there?" she said again. "Let me ask you something. The kids had decided they didn't come out and say they weren't gonna help the man. But they're not, they're obviously not. Why do you think children would not wanna help an adult?
In this type of situation, I feel like they gonna help him because he will basically he like get out. He knows that the kids know that he don't go to that group, in my opinion. But yeah.
Well, that's true. I think you're right too. Do you think the kids may have thought, this is one time we've got an adult, and that adult is dependent on me. And we can do whatever we want. We don't have to let him out if we don't wanna let him out, and he's dependent on what we say and do. I don't know, that's just a thought. But let's look at something in particular. Pay close attention to this question here that I'm about to ask you. When it says, she looked around at us, and then she called down, yes, they're all gone now. Isn't there any water down there? I don't think anyone smiled at how easy it was to deceive him, because this was too important. Do you think the kids kind of got something out of knowing that everything was in their court? The ball was in their court. Nothing else mattered. And she's asking trivial questions. She's not really talking to him the way he's talking to her, because it says that he's just calling out and everything. And the kids are asking simple questions. Is there any water? No, he said, it's very dry. He cleared his throat. Do you think it will rain? She stood up and took in the whole sky with her blue eyes, making sure, no, I don't think so. We heard him coughing in the well, and we waited for a while, thinking about him waiting in the well. Resting on the grass and cement by the well, I tried to picture him. I tried to imagine the gesture of his hand reaching to cover his mouth each time he coughed, or perhaps he was too tired to make that gesture each time. After an hour, he began calling again, but for some reason we didn't want to answer. We got up and began running, filling up with panic as we moved until we were racing across the rut to the old field. I kept turning, stumbling as I looked behind. Perhaps he heard us getting up and running away from the well. Only Wendy stayed by the well for a while, watching us run as he grew louder and wilder until she finally ran too. We were all very far away. Is that not horrifying to you? If I were a kid and there were an adult in there, and as the text says, he grew louder and wilder, trying to get their attention, and no one would help him, it would be horrifying to me. The next morning when we came back, most of us carrying bread or fruit or something to eat in our pockets, Arthur brought a canvas bag from his house and a plastic jug of water. When we got to the well, we stood around quietly for a moment, listening for him. Maybe he's asleep, Wendy said. We sat down around the mouth of the well on the old concrete slab, warming in the sun, coursing with ants and tiny insects. Aaron called down then. When everyone was comfortable, the man answered right away as if he'd been listening to us the whole time. Did your parents get help? Arthur kneeled at the edge of the well and called, watch out! And then he let the bag fall, holding it out for a moment, maybe for the man to see, and it hit the ground more quickly than I had expected. That, combined with a feeling that he could hear everything we said, made him suddenly closer, as if he might be able to see us. I wanted everyone to be quiet so that if he heard or saw anyone, he would not notice me. The man in the well started coughing, and Arthur volunteered. There's some water in the bag. We all brought something. We could hear him moving around down there, and after a few minutes he asked, when are they coming? What did your parents say? We all looked at each other, aware that he couldn't address anyone in particular. He must have understood this because he called out in his thin, groping voice, what are your names? Let me ask you something. They didn't want him to see them. Y'all established that already. He didn't want them to see him. And there's something about being in a group when it comes to being in a mob type situation where it's anonymity is what I'm trying, anonymity, where you don't want anybody to know who you are. You just want to stay in the shadows. And we know that's what the kids have done, but now he's asking, what are your names? Why do you think the children didn't want to give their names?
Because they didn't want to
They did what?
get help.
Exactly right. They didn't go get help. And it's something about, let me give you an example. People that are on farms and they grow animals, especially like chickens or cows, things like that, things that you can actually eat. They don't name them because they're gonna have to eat them. And there's something about giving it a name that makes it very personal. You know, you don't wanna be sitting at the table eating and say, well, Bessie's ribs sure did taste good. You know, that's just, that's just gross. So farm people know you don't give it a name, because if you give it a name, it makes it very personal and you won't be able to eat it. Well, it's the same thing with these children. It becomes personal. He knows who they are. He can, if he ever did get out, he could say who their names were. But as long as they were anonymous, it's kind of like they were back hiding behind the bushes or in the darkness, where I'm really not responsible for the man in there, because he doesn't know who I am. I'm at the back of the mob pushing, and people at the back of the mob supposedly don't bear any responsibility. We all know that's not true, but that's the way you feel when you're a part of a mob. And that's the way this group of kids are. They feel like if they stay secluded in the group, he knows no one, that there's safety there. We can hear him moving around down there after a few minutes, and he asked us, when are they coming, and what did your parents say? No one answered until Aaron, who was the oldest, said, my father said he's coming with the police, and he knows what to do. We admired Aaron very much for coming up with this on the spot. Are they on their way? The man in the well asked. We could hear that he was eating. My father said, don't worry, because he's coming with the police. Little Jason came up next to Aaron and asked, what's your name? Because we still didn't know what to call him. They just knew him as Man. When we talked among ourselves, he had simply become the Man. He didn't answer, and so Jason asked him how old he was. And then Grace came up too and asked him something. I don't remember. We all asked such stupid questions, and he wouldn't answer anyone. Finally, we all stopped talking. We laid down on the cement. Let me ask you something. What do you think the chances might have been if the man had told them his name? Would that have changed anything with the kids? You don't think so? The only thing it might have changed, it might have been like those farm animals, that once you know somebody's name, it's personal. And they might have realized, John's in the bottom of the well. Not just some vanilla flavored person, but John's in the bottom of the well. And we know him now because we've established some type of rapport with him. It was a hot day, so after a while, Grace got up and little Jason, another young boy, Robert, I think, and went to town to sit in the cool movie theater. It was what he did most of the afternoons back then. After an hour, everyone had except Wendy and myself, and I was beginning to think I'd go too. We called up to us all of a sudden, hey, are they coming now? Yes, Wendy said, looking at me, and I nodded my head. She sounded certain. I think they're almost here, Aaron said. His dad's almost here. As soon as she said it, she was sorry. She knew she'd broken one of the rules. I could see it on her face, her eyes filling with space as they moved back from the well. Now he had one of our names. She said, they're going to come to cover up the mistake, but there it was, and there was nothing they could do about it. Let's read that one more time. Wendy said, looking at me, and I nodded my head, she sounded certain. I think they're almost here. Aaron said his dad's almost here. And then she realized what she had said, and she had broken one of the rules. I could see it on her face, her eyes filled with space as she moved back from the well. They're going to come to cover. They're coming to come. They're going to come. She's trying to cover up her mistake, but there it was, out there in the open for everybody to see. I want you to pull your chairs closer together so y'all can talk. Let's see what, Alicia, just pull yours in, just make it close three. Make it close three so that y'all can discuss. This is what I want you to know. How did breaking the rules affect Aaron? Because she used his name. And how did she know it was a rule? And that's going to take some thoughts. I'm going to give y'all a few seconds, 3 minutes to think about that. She broke a rule. How did she break it? How did she know it was a rule? And how did it affect Aaron? Okay? So when I say go, you've got 3 minutes to discuss it where you are in your seats right there. At a volume level 2, What are we gonna do, Alicia?
Ask, talk about, the questions you gave us. The first question was, how is it gonna affect everybody? Like the
Yes.
girl saying her name, say
Yes.
his name, and we're gonna do it as a volume 2.
Volume level 2. What was the second part of that question? You remember, LaShawn? How did it affect Aaron?
Basically, how we really affect everybody seeing his name.
That's right, that's right. All right, so ready and go. Y'all go ahead, and I'm gonna give you a few minutes by yourself to discuss that. Y'all keep going. I'm hearing good stuff. Keep going. See, y'all got closer. Y'all did really good. I like it. All right, clap twice if you're with me. 1, 2, there you go. So what did y'all think? Let's first of all, well, how did it affect Aaron?
Because, you know, he can get in trouble for many stuff, you know, and he's in a group.
Mm-hmm. And he knows his name. And he can tell everybody. He knows who he is. What did you think about the question, how did she know it was a rule?
Because nobody else will do it.
Yeah, it really wasn't spoken about, but it's not obvious because in first, when they was like, when I would say talking, they really had time to like think for themselves. It wasn't like in good decision making.
They did a lot of looking around at one another, didn't they? You know, they kind of read one another and they realized, So she knew she'd messed up. Y'all did good. It was a hot day, so after a while, Grace got up, little Jason, another young boy, Robert I think, went down to town to sit in the cool movie theater. He called up to us all of a sudden, "Are they coming now?" "Yes," Wendy said, looking at me, and I nodded my head. She sounded certain. "I think they're almost here." Aaron said his dad's almost here. The man in the well didn't say anything for a few minutes. Then he surprised us by asking, "Is it going to rain?" Wendy stood up and turned around, and she had done the other day, but the sky was clear. "No," she said. Then he asked again, "They're coming. You said Aaron's dad?" And he shouted, "Right?" So with that, we jumped, stood up, and began running away just as we had the day before. We could hear him shouting for a while, and we were afraid someone might hear. I thought that toward the end, he had said he was sorry, but I never asked Wendy what she thought he had said. Everyone was there again on the following morning. It was all I could think about during supper the night before. And then anticipation in the morning over breakfast. My mother was very upset with something at the time. I could hear her weeping in the night in her room downstairs, and the stubborn murmur of my father. There was a feeling to those days, months actually, that I can't describe without resorting to the man in the well, as though it were a great whispering, like a gathering of clouds or the long sound of turbulent wind that wrecks the ocean. At the well, we put together the things to eat that we smuggled out, but we hadn't even gotten them all in the bag when the voice of the man in the well soared out sharply. "They're on their way now?" We stood very still so that he couldn't hear us. But I knew he was coming. I knew what was coming, and I couldn't do anything, so softened the blur of the words of the voice. "Aaron," he pronounced. Don't you know, Aaron just died. And I had imagined him practicing that voice all night long and holding it in his mouth so that he couldn't let it slip away in his sleep. Aaron had lost all the color in his face, and he looked at us with suspicion as if he had somehow taken on a part of the man in the well. I didn't even glance at Wendy. We were both too embarrassed. Neither of us said anything. We were all quiet then. Arthur finished assembling the bag. We could see his hand shaking as he dropped it into the well. We heard the man in the well moving around. After 10 minutes or so, Grace called down to him, "What's your name?" But someone pulled her back from the well, and we became silent again. Today that question humiliated us with its simplicity. There was no sound for a while from the well except for the cloth noises and the scraping the man in the well made as he moved around. Then he called out in a pleasant voice, "Aaron, what do you think my name is?" Aaron, who had been very still this whole time, looked around at all of us again. We knew he was afraid. His fingers were pulling from with a separate life at the collar of his shirt, and maybe because she felt badly for him, Wendy answered instead, "Is your name Charles?" It sounded a name, but the man in the well answered. "No," the man said. She thought for a moment. "Edgar?" No. Little Jason called out, "David?" "No," the man in the well said. Then Aaron, who had been absolutely quiet, said, "Arthur?" in a small, clear voice, and we all started. I could see Arthur was furious, but Aaron was older and bigger than he was, and nothing can be said or done without giving himself his name away. He knew the man in the well was listening for the changes in our breath, anything. Aaron didn't look at Arthur or anyone, and then he began giving all of our names. At one at a time, we all watched him, trembling our faces, the faces I had seen pasted in the spectators in the freak tent when the circus came to town. We were watching with such deformity take place before our eyes, and I remember the spasm of anger when he said my name. I felt the man in the well soak it up because the man in the well understood. The man in the well didn't say anything now. It's kind of like he had a piece of them, didn't he? He had gotten a piece of each person up there because he knew their name. When Aaron was done, we all waited for the man in the well to speak up. I stood on one leg, then the other, and eventually I sat down. We had to wait for an hour, and today no one wanted to leave to lie in the shade of the velvet movie seats. At last, the man in the well said, "All right then, Arthur, what do you think I look like?" We heard him cough a couple times, and it sounded like smacking of lips. Arthur, who was sitting on the ground with his chin propped on his fist, didn't say anything. How could he? I knew I couldn't answer myself for the man in the well had he called me by name. He called a few of us, and I watched the shutter moved from face to face. Then he was quiet for a while, and it was afternoon now, and the light was changing, withdrawing from the well. It was as if the well was filling up with earth. The man in the well moved around a bit, and then he called Jason. He asked, "How old do you think I am, Jason?" He didn't seem to care that no one would answer, or seem to expect that no one would. He said, Wendy, are they coming now? Is Aaron's dad coming now? He walked around a bit. We heard him rummaging in the bag of food, and he said, all right, what's my name? He used everyone's name. He asked everyone. When he said my name, I felt the water clouding in my eyes, and I wanted to throw stones, dirt down into the well to crush out his voice. But we couldn't do anything. None of us did, because then he would know. In the evening, we could tell he was getting tired. He wasn't saying much and seemed to have lost interest in us. Before he left that day, as we were rising quietly and looking at the dark shadows of the trees we had to move through to reach our homes, he said, why didn't you tell anyone? He coughed. Didn't you want to tell anyone? Perhaps he heard the hesitation in our breaths, that it was almost night and that we were spared the detail of having to see and read each other's faces. He first asked him, he said, why didn't you tell anyone? And then he coughed and he said, didn't you want to tell anyone? Perhaps he heard the hesitation in our breaths, but it was almost night then, and we were spared the detail of having to see and read each other's faces. What do you think it meant? Why do you think they were glad that they didn't see one another's faces? Can you take a stab at it? It's along the same lines of just before. Guilt was taken over. It's kind of like, you know how you haven't talked to a friend in a long time on the phone, and you want to call them, but it's been so long since you've talked, it's almost too long to call, because they're going to say, why didn't you call me before now? You know, when they could have called you too. The kids are in that boat. Time is ticking, and they're in that boat of we've waited too long, and now what are we going to do? They've lost their anonymity. He knows them, he knows their name, and now what are they going to do? That night it rained, and I listened to the rain on the roof, and my mother sobbing downstairs until I fell asleep. After that, we didn't play by the well anymore. Even when we were much older, we didn't go back. I'm never going to go back. Think about this. The kids said they never wanted to go back, and they never did go back. What do you think happened to the man? What do y'all think happened to the man? It didn't say, so I mean, you're not going to get a wrong answer. He drowned. I think you're right. I think the man drowned. And the kids could not bear to go back, could they? Because of the guilt. But in their little minds, they're thinking we all shared in that guilt. That's pitiful. I agree. Do you think they ever spoke about it again? Do you ever think they ever want to talk about it to anybody?
No.
Now, if it were you, be honest, what would you do? I mean, let's say you'd already made your decision, the man probably died. Is there anybody you'd tell eventually? No? No? Not even your mama or anybody close like that? Just let it ride, huh? I don't know anything about that. But they sacrificed him to save themselves, but look how much they sacrificed of him to save what little bit they did for themselves. And they didn't want to see the shame on one another's faces. What does that say about the way we process guilt? What do y'all know about guilt? You know how it feels, I know you know that. But how do we a lot of times process guilt, right or wrong? One time, I'll be honest with you, I was at church. And I knew I had hurt somebody's feelings. And I hadn't done anything to hurt their feelings. But their feelings were hurt. Now I'm innocent, but they're hurt. And I kept thinking, what do I do? How do I fix it? What, you know? And so I should have gone to them immediately and talked to them about it, and I didn't. And I waited a long time. And had I gone immediately, I think they would have been forgiving. I would have been somewhat repentant in my heart about the way they felt. But I waited too long to ask them, what did I do to hurt your feelings? I'm sorry. Whatever it is, I'm sorry that I hurt you. I didn't mean to hurt you, I didn't realize that I did, but if you're hurt and I did it, I want to apologize for it. The person wasn't nearly as forgiving as they had been to the person who had come to them first. The kids are in this same thing, and that's the way guilt does. It weighs heavy on your heart. And I'm just gonna tell you this, do you know the best way to deal with guilt? This is along the lines of that, have a backbone thing, to embrace it. It breaks guilt. When you embrace what you've done, it breaks everything around you, the wall that holds the feeling that you have inside. But the kids would not do that. And what about this kid at the end that's dealing with his mom that's crying all the time? Why do you think the author put that kid in? I mean, we don't know why the mom was crying. We don't know what she was upset about. We just know she was upset about something. Why do you think that's in there?
She probably did something.
Something's wrong. Yeah. It sets that overall tone and mood in the home that something is unsettled. Something is not right. And it's kind of a visual of what the mom is expressing is the way the child is feeling, except she's letting it all out. How do you think, and tell me if you've got any thoughts on this one, and then if not, I'm gonna let you do your exit ticket. How does the children's behavior mirror real world examples of the bystander effect? Have you got any kind of idea about the bystander effect? And Sean, you said it at the beginning when I asked you about the mob. When I asked you about who was responsible. And you said it. Not the people all together, the ones that didn't do anything is what you said. They just sat there and they allowed it to happen and they didn't say anything. My little boy came home from school and there was this little tiny boy in his class. And he said, Mama, he said, this little boy's bullying me. And I said, what? And he said, this is what he's doing. And he told me, and I said, Landon, you need to embrace that and don't just let the little boy do it. You need to do something, you need to stop it. Well, Landon was like in the 4th grade. And so the next day he went to school and the little boy tried bullying again. Well, this time Landon grabbed the boy by the shirt and put him up against the wall. That is not exactly what I wanted him to do, but this, nevertheless, And he told him to quit, leave him alone, don't ever do it again. When he came home, he said, Mama, he did. He left me alone for the rest of the day. He said, he went on to somebody else. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, don't you let him do that to anybody else. So my son had to learn that the responsibility was not in don't let other people mistreat you, but don't you allow other people to mistreat anybody else. Because I think from what y'all have said and what you've learned is that guilt not only is it into those who are performing, the transgression, but also those who sit back and listen. Okay, so what I want you to do at this point in time, you're gonna have from now until the end of class, which is probably 5 minutes. I wanna make sure you have some time. I want you to answer those questions, and your name should be on your paper. Answer those questions on your exit ticket. And then when you get through, you can just put your folder on the desk and you will be free to go. And I appreciate you and I enjoyed it. If you have any questions, let me know. Y'all got from now to the end of class.